There is somebody who takes a risk and goes into their own business. A lot of people, though, don't have a choice. I mean, in my case, my first entrepreneurial thing was when I left a company thinking I was going to be a brilliant entrepreneur. And in the first 6 years that I was in business for myself, I borrowed $123,000 from 17 different credit cards to finance my business, and it took me 6 years to pay them off. And then I started this business 16 years ago, but I started this because I couldn't find a job. I would prefer it at the time to have found a job.
And the industry that you were in was
pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason,
I couldn't find anybody that wanted to hire a 51-year-old guy that lived in Phoenix, Arizona, to do what I thought I was good at, which was running either a sales organization or running a pharmaceutical company. And so in order to feed my family, I had no choice but to start a business. And I actually started that by accident. I had a guy call me and say, I need you to do a speech. And I said, for what? He said, I got 67 people. They all want to hold hands and sing songs. Nobody wants to be accountable. And you're the most inspirational speaker I've ever heard. Why don't you come over here and motivate them? And I said, well, look, I'd be happy to take your money. But the truth is you'd be wasting your money because you're not changing people's behavior with a speech. And he said, well, what do I need? I said, well, you need somebody who understands change management. How do you orchestrate behavioral change with your people? And you need to focus on your leaders. He said, well, could you do that? I said, yeah, I probably could. He said, well, send me a proposal. And literally that's how I started my company. And in the middle of that first project, he asked me, because he had worked for me, and he knew that I had been the top manager in the country 7 out of 8 years. And he asked me, he said, hey, we have this product that's hard to sell. Can you show us how to sell more of this? And I said, I probably could. And so then I asked myself, well, how did I do it back when I was a manager? And the reality was I really learned from good people. I learned from the best salespeople. And so I did. I went and worked with them for 2 years, and their product went from $350 million to over $1 billion. And then I got a reputation as somebody that if you had a product that was difficult to sell, call me. And that's how the business grew to today, 30 employees and roughly $10 million in revenue. But it was not because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, not because I was a risk taker, not because I had a brilliant idea, but because I couldn't feed my family.
There you go. Jerry Acuff joining us on the show today. Sales. Someone told me that someone named you one of the top 50 salespeople around.
Yeah, I mean, they had to be drunk, but I mean, the truth is,
that would be me. No.
Well, I mean, look, they get a lot of these lists. I mean, I'm rated one of the top 10 sales experts in the world, and who knows how those things are figured out. I did write a blog after I was named one of the 50 greatest salespeople of all time, and said I would never disrespect their research. That would not be nice. Yeah. However, I know 50 people better than me, yeah, but those things are nice. But the truth is, our clients don't pay for my titles. Our clients pay for us to help them sell more stuff that's hard to sell. Yeah, I don't know of anybody who would shy away from more revenue. The challenge that our business has, and I think a lot of business have, is that people believe that they don't need help. And I mean, my bias is that the key to all growth and development in life, personal, professional, business-wise, is self-awareness. It's being truly aware of where you are and how you go about getting where you really want to go. And our average client comes to us after they've already experienced huge problems, and then they want us to save them.
Is it tough to retrain bad salespeople? If someone's got some horrible habits, or would you prefer to train someone who's never been in sales?
Yes.
Yes.
I would far rather hire someone who's never been in sales, who's hungry, who thinks that they are lucky to have this opportunity. I hired 20 people in 8 years. Of the 20 people I hired, one of them had experience. And if I force ranked them today, now, of the 20 people I hired, 19 out of the 20 were in the top 50 in the company out of 650 within 2 years.
Wow.
13 of them got promoted. The only one that wasn't in the top 50, I fired after 3 weeks because he wasn't working. So if you stayed with me longer than a month, you were guaranteed to be in the top 8% of the company.
Wow.
But only one of those had experience, and if I had to force rank them, he would be 18 out of 20.
Now, your company is Delta Point.
Yes.
And you guys work with corporations across the country.
Yes.
So all types of
businesses. A lot of it, in the beginning has been pharmaceuticals because I used to run a drug company. And so our natural sort of wheelhouse, but we've done lots of work for other kinds of companies, big companies, small companies, et cetera.
Is there one thing that holds a salesperson back from being the best salesperson they can be?
Yes. That one thing to me is their belief about what selling is. And the first chapter of my book, I wrote a best-selling book called Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer. And the first chapter is what is selling. And the truth is that one of the reasons why, if you play word association with people and say the word sales, 97% of the responses are negative. Because the perception is that salespeople are aggressive, pushy, and they're difficult people to deal with. And so most people don't want to be that. I mean, it's one of the reasons why millennials, I think, have a reticence about being in sales. It's because they don't understand what selling is. I didn't want to be in sales. I literally quit my first sales job because I couldn't get out of the car and call on customers because my basic personality is introverted. And so I didn't want to go try and push myself on other people. Now, I literally designed selling in a way that I said, hey, that's me. He said, I have two definitions of selling. Number one, selling is teaching. In every successful sale, some education takes place. The customer or prospect learns something they didn't know before, which is totally true. Mm-hmm. He said, now, most people don't like to be taught, but they like to learn. And so if you think about the best teachers that you ever had, those were teachers that made it fun, interactive, and asked you questions and made you think. Well, that's what great salespeople do. The second thing he said is selling is finding out what people want and helping them get it. But he said two things about that are true. One is most people don't know what they want, but they think they do. I walk into Staples one time to buy a printer. And so I asked the guy, the 20-year-old kid waiting on me, says, are you looking for anything specific? I said, yeah, printers. He said, okay, here they are. So he walks away. I said, wait, don't walk away. I don't know anything about printers. Which one of these would you buy? He said, well, what do you use a printer for? And I said, well, mostly just like printing documents. How much photos do you use? He said, I don't use photos.
Those are good questions, right?
All right, exactly. Right. And I said, well, he said, well, then these two I would consider. And I said, okay, of those two, which one do you buy? He said, well, I'd buy this one. I said, okay, I'll take that one. He said, can I ask you another question? I said, do I need anything else? He said, well, let me ask you a question. Is your home one story or two? And I'm like, this is not the normal question you get from a Staples 20-year-old employee. And I said, two, why do you ask? He said, well, do you think you'd ever, where are you going to put the printer? I said, downstairs. He said, do you think you'd ever want to be upstairs and print something downstairs? I said, yeah, I'd want that. He said, well, then you need a router. I said, well, what's a router? And so he tells me what a router is. I said, well, give me a router. And so then he said, you got cables for the router? Of course I didn't have cables for the router. I spent $500. Now, the truth is, when I walked in there, my belief was I wanted a printer. What he taught me with his questioning and his discovery, I would call it, was that I didn't need a printer. I needed a printer that can print from any place in my home. And to do that, I had to have something different than what I thought I wanted. So selling is finding out what people want and helping them get it. Now, the second thing Fred Herman said, when this was hugely liberating to me, he said, if people want what you don't have, you have no right to sell them what you do have. And I said, oh, my gosh. Wow. Now my job is not pushing my stuff on anybody. It's getting them to buy. And that's when I came to the conclusion that if people hate to be sold, but they love to buy, why do we teach people how to sell? Why don't we teach people how to get the customer to buy in? So my book is about how do you get people to buy in, not how do you sell them. Now, if you get them to buy in, ultimately you have made a sale. So it's kind of the same thing. But the concept, the mental thought process that goes through preparing to do that and executing that is completely different.
Jerry Acuff is joining us in the studio. He is the CEO of Delta Point. Let's take a break. We come back. We'll go over some what you look for in a great salesperson, and perhaps if you're in sales now, you can message me on Facebook at 6:20 a.m. or Brian Glenn TV, either one on Facebook. Let me know if you have any questions on how to be a better, or I should say, an effective salesperson. It's 4:44. Stick around. 48 as we wrap up our conversation about sales with Jerry Acuff. He is a CEO of Delta Point, based right there in Scottsdale. Beautiful part of the country.
Yeah, love it there.
Love it there.
Yeah.
Hot and dry.
Yeah.
Never cold. Well, no, it can get cold, right?
It can get cold, yeah.
We were kind of going over your sales career, and of course, you've specifically been in the pharmaceutical drug companies, but you work with all types of companies.
Right.
So
yes.
if a broadcaster like Salem wants to hire your company, Delta Point, I say bring it on, because everyone can sharpen their tools a little better, a little stronger, right?
Right.
We talked about some of the great characteristics of a salesperson, and you pointed out that you'd rather take someone who's never been in sales and train them. And out of 20 people, you had one really after 90 days. Is that the limit, 90 days? Do you know if someone's got what it takes after 90 days?
Usually it takes about 6 months, not
6
90
months.
days. Yeah, but this guy wasn't working, and I found that out after 3 weeks.
And that's from his call sheet or just his logs? And
well, I actually caught him lying about who he had called on.
Okay.
And so
once you figure that out,
once I figured that out, I didn't want him.
There you go. But 6 months generally.
Yeah, you can tell whether they're going to make it or not.
Do you look at percentage of closes? I mean, do you look at bottom line numbers? How many new leads? Is funnel, a sales funnel? I mean,
what I really look at is their activity.
There you go.
And then are they doing what I'm telling them to do? Because I know exactly what to teach people. Even though I teach, everybody's got a different strength, and so you have to play their strengths. But if they're doing the basics and they're having the activity, I never worry about the achievement if the activity's there. And people that are working 50, 60 hours a week, who can deliver a decent story, who are good listeners, as you talked about earlier, those people are going to be wildly effective.
Okay. Yeah. Do you remember the days of cold calling?
I do.
Yeah?
I do, yeah.
What's one of the biggest mistakes that salespeople do when it comes to cold calling?
They don't really understand anything about the customer before they go there.
They don't do the research.
Exactly. They don't do the research. I mean, the reality is with the internet, you can find out tons of stuff about anybody. I mean, I had a customer that would only want to give me 15 minutes on the phone, and I researched them. And then before I got on, when I got on the phone, I said, hey, before we get into this conversation, I have to tell you something about you that fascinates me. He said, what is it? And I said, well, you played football at Harvard when I played football at VMI. And he said, well, why does that fascinate you? I said, because you didn't go on scholarship. I did. And that meant that you played football at Harvard, which is an incredibly difficult school, got an education, became a doctor, while I went on a scholarship. And that's a completely different mindset. We talked for 25 minutes, so we're over the time limit. And I asked him, I said, hey, we're over the time limit. He said, oh, come on, I'm having fun. So my point is, you can change a cold call to a warm call if you're actually prepared. Most people don't prepare.
Mm-hmm. Do you like sales lunches? You like doing that and taking somebody out to lunch and talk business?
Well, I think eating with a customer or a prospect is huge.
Really?
Because, well, first place, the psychologists tell us that if I eat with you, it says I already feel closer to you. And my bias is the three things that really drive your success in selling are your knowledge. I mean, how much do you really know about the customer, about selling, about the customer's business, about your competitors that sell it? The second one is messaging, how you say what you say. There's a difference between is this important and how important is this? How you ask a question really, really matters. And 86% of salespeople, the studies show, ask the wrong questions. And so really teaching people the framework, the architecture of a great question is important. And the third thing is my relationships. I mean, nobody buys from us, no one, if they don't listen to us. And the relationship carries the interest maybe 25% of the time. So I'm always trying to build relationships with people so that when I call them or if I see them, they want to hear what I have to say because it's me.
Great point. Jerry Acuff joining us in the studio. His company is Delta Point. We talked earlier today, and you brought up a great point. It's all based on relationships. Like if you're calling me and I know you, I'm picking up the phone. I'm saying, hey, it's Jerry.
But the relationship only carries the interest. The relationship doesn't carry the business. What carries the business is a value proposition that's in the best interest of the client, number one. And number two, my willingness to leverage that relationship to ask you to actually do business with me. The vast majority of people who have great relationships do not leverage them because they're concerned that if I ask you to buy, you'll think I'm aggressive. My viewpoint is if I have a great relationship with you, why wouldn't I want you using my product or service if I really believe it's better?
Yeah,
and so the relationship matters, but it only matters if you use it, and it only matters if you're not afraid to advance your ideas with the people that you say you're closest to.
Don't you love those one-call closes? I mean, they're the best. If you hit it off with the customer,
exactly.
and it goes great, and you end up closing the deal.
Yeah.
Do you remember some of your first one-call closes in your whole career?
Oh, I mean, I remember a lot of them, but a lot of them are one-call closes because I got the relationship set up. Gotcha. I mean, I had a customer one time that wouldn't see me or my rep, and so I judiciously and intentionally asked everybody I knew, how well do you know this person, if at all? And finally, someone said, well, I know him really well. My second question was, how comfortable would you be introducing me? See, I never asked, would you introduce me?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And so his guy said, well, let's call him right now. So he literally called him and said, hey, I want you to meet this guy. He's different. I want you to meet him. He's not like other salespeople. He's different. I went up and met with him the next day. I got all his business before I left there. But the stage was set because I had used my other relationship to get an entree to this person, and using that relationship credentialed me.
As we wrap up this hour, if there's someone out there listening right now and you're in sales and you're just burned out, maybe you've had a rough look. We're on day 4 of the all new quarter. What's your advice to them?
Read a book. Read a book. My life changed in 1981 when I read a book by Roger Staubach, who everybody in Dallas knows. And Staubach's book said, chances are you'll be the same person 5 years from today that you are today, with the exception of 2 things: people you meet and the books you read. The person who won't read truly no better off than the person who can't read. And when I read that, I'd been in sales for 10 years, and I had not read a book. And I've read 569 business books since that day. I've read one book 69 times. And what I know is the more I learn about selling, the more there is to learn. So I'm in constant search of a new idea. And if you feel stagnant in selling, if you want to get better at selling, read a book. Read Og Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World. Read Staubach's book, Winning Strategies in Selling. Read my book, Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer. Read Jeffrey Gitomer's book, The Little Red Book of Sales Answers. You read any of those books, and I'll promise you, if you put your heart and soul into it, you'll get better at selling.
There you go. I love it. And of course, you talk about reinventing yourself, and I know we got about a couple minutes left. Don't be afraid to reinvent yourself.
I think, as I told you earlier, I think most people have to reinvent themselves after 50. But, I mean, you always have to reinvent yourself when you're having trouble finding employment or you're not hireable. And reinventing yourself really means, okay, what are my strengths? What am I good at? What could I be good at? What would people pay me to do? And a lot of that also goes back to getting connected to your purpose. And if you haven't seen, Simon Sinek's video on, how great leaders inspire others, where he focuses on understand your why you do what you do. When you know why you do what you do, you are far more likely to be great at it.
Man, Jerry, I want you on the show every day. I'm going to get you to call in from Scottsdale. Then I can get you off the golf course. You play golf?
Not very often, okay. No. I mean, I love golf, but I'm so bad at it, I'm smart enough to give it up.
Before you kill somebody,
Exactly.
Of course. The company is Delta Point. Give us the website for you if people want more information about your company and what you can do.
It's www.jerryacuff.com, ACUFF.
Man, that is good stuff. I was warned that this would be one of the better segments that I've ever done, and I'd agree, man. I think that you inspire a lot of passion in people, and I know that sales is tough, man. It's tough, and if you're out there and you've been selling you've had a great career, but all of a sudden you've hit the wall for whatever reason, go read a book, and perhaps maybe it's time to change course and find a new purpose and reinvent yourself. Yeah, that is as simple as that. So I just, man. Okay, so you go back to Scottsdale tomorrow?
I actually go to Cleveland tomorrow.
Cleveland?
Yeah, Cleveland. And going to work with a sales rep for one of my clients.
There you go.
And then go back home on Thursday morning.
There you go. Well, I'm so glad you took time out of your schedule.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. It's been great to meet you.
I absolutely have all the respect in the world for you, because I think you change people's lives is what it is when you think about it. They get in contact with you. You're changing the course of people's lives.